Hi, everyone. Welcome to another episode on Spotlight on CS Ops. I'm here with my co host, Matthew Ling.
Hello, John.
Hi,
Great to see you
Matthew.
again.
Great to see you as well. And today we have the pleasure of speaking with Dan Cummings. Dan is someone who's spent a lot of time in business systems. He currently works at Dynatrace, so I actually get to work with Dan on a regular basis. And as previously to that, started in support many years ago. So, happy to have you here, and I would love to hear a bit more about your story.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Yeah, as John said, I started off in our technical product specialist team, which was really kind of your traditional tier one, tier two support, mostly handling this kind of new capability as I was coming into Dynatrace of having chat directly in the product, and interacting with our customers in a more seamless way, rather than email threads or go to this support web page and open up a ticket with us. It was intended to be much more natural, conversation between you and your customer. And so, as that team kind of grew, I had a number of years in that position where, kind of grew up the ladder. Eventually, had an opportunity to transition into more of your support architect role, looking at processes, some of the technologies that were being utilized inside of Dynatrace at that time. And then that naturally, kind of as our business systems team was growing up, that role kind of got consumed by business systems. And so I went through a number of different opportunities within business systems, including like solution architecture, as we were kind of exploring a lot of our space around success support, and broader, programs that kind of fall under a single umbrella for Dynatrace. And now actually I manage a team of three. It's a pretty small team, but we support most of the back end systems for our success and support organization in Dynatrace.
Man, what a great and memorable intro. Because I'm memorable in the sense that I'm like, yeah, that sounds so familiar. Where it's like, yeah, I grew up in support, and so I got into the underbelly of everything and the daisy chaining, and then suddenly you become an expert in how things work, if you will. I don't know if that website's still around. I guess it is, howthingswork.com. But it's like, oh yeah, you become that person and have a new mantle. So how did you make the transition, or was it just natural from the support, even from customer facing? I'm going to assume you're not customer facing now, and maybe you should clarify that. But like, how did you make that swing from I'm in front of customers to in front of my fellow employees?
It was a fairly natural kind of swing, especially kind of the trajectory of the past 7 or so years. I am no longer customer facing, although all of the systems that we have to interact with and keep running are all customer facing. And I think that actually is kind of a narrowing distinction as like a lot of the technology grows to become more automated and there is a lot more impact. Like you as a developer, as a technical team in IT, really have the ability to kind of change the experience directly with the customer at the end of the day. That maybe traditionally you would kind of be put into like some back room right somewhere and just say, hey, please configure this thing that I would like. You're seeing a lot more configuration based changes that you can make to a system that inevitably kind of put you at the forefront. And so you need to start thinking about, as a developer, what does this look like? Or as an admin of the system, what does it look like when I make this change for my customer, and how is that going to affect their experience? And is this kind of in line with what the organization is looking for? And so, yeah, it was pretty much natural for me to kind of grow into that role. I've always been very technical. I come from a background of software development. And so Dynatrace is a very technical company, works primarily with folks in SRE roles, DevOps, but also like a lot of development space as well. And so there's just a natural kind of language that was there on the customer facing side starting off. And then looking at all of the kind of imposed inefficiencies that a lot of newer businesses have, and as they're kind of growing up, really pointed me towards wanting to tackle those from a systems perspective and saying, well, how does this thing kind of work in the background, and what can I do to contribute to kind of change that environment for the people that I work with?
That's cool. That's quite a trajectory, and it kind of makes sense. Like as you say, you started, technical, you kind of ended up in a technical customer facing role, and now you're back to maybe more internal facing. I'm curious, as you're growing, like as you work for a fairly large organization, what are some of the maybe like challenges or lessons that you've learned along the way in operating like business systems for support and success, customer success?
Yeah, it's funny because I think the kind of adage that we've been carrying with us from the support and success team is that the value that we're exchanging with our customers really comes in play with the conversations that we're having, and are those really valuable conversations, and kind of taking that in as a really core principle to the work that I do. That's kind of been manifest in the business systems role, where a lot of the times it really does just come down to whether or not we're having valuable conversations, whether we're engaged with the correct people at the correct time. How do we ensure that the decisions that's being made today is not going to have kind of this cascading effect in the future? And if it does, like, how do we still like learn and grow from that? And it's all centered around the conversations that we're having. And so like practicing that and ensuring that when you're having a discussion with somebody, you're trying to make it as valuable as possible, has kind of carried through even into the business systems and back end side, where you would think it's more, oh, I need to think about all of these technical aspects of the job and what the systems are doing, when almost 80%, 90% of the time it's just communicating with others in the organization, regardless of size, right? I have friends that work at very small organizations, and it's exactly the same experience for them, right? They're spending much less of their time over the years looking at the technical aspects and many more kind of understanding the business and how it processes, or all the processes that are around it, but also how do you ensure that you're not kind of just making decisions willy-nilly that are going to bite you in the end, a year or two from now.
What's your recommendation, or how do you, maybe we'll phrase it this way. How do you coach the people on your team to go there and not just be like, okay, we're checking boxes in an app and we're deciding if the button's going to be blue or green, but being able to say, okay, success systems team, do we know this business? Like, and then how well do we know this business and the outcomes that they're going for? How do you crack that egg?
Yeah, that's a great question, because I think it starts at the leadership and management level of really kind of trying to mirror that behavior that you're looking for. In my experience, you're much more likely to get buy-in if you show that kind of excitement and interest with others. It's much easier for somebody to be like, oh yeah, that is something that is interesting. I might actually want to explore and read that if I'm personally bringing to the conversations that I'm having with the team this kind of interest and curiosity about where the space is currently at. And, oh, this is kind of an interesting, blog post that somebody put up. Sure, it has like 10 views on it, but it's presenting something that's kind of novel and interesting that we just don't think about because we're very instilled in our, day-to-day processes. Like, how does this organization function? We should absolutely be looking across many different organizations and listening to a lot of people. And so trying to instill that, trying to kind of show that behavior by making it inherent to myself, but also keeping that like customer first mantra always in your mind. And so if it's a change request that you have coming into the team, really thinking about like, what does that change? How does that change manifest into a bunch of these different outputs that we already know are valuable to us? Is it attached to things? Is it not? Like, should I not do that thing? Like, just ask yourself that question, because it might not actually be valuable. Or transition to, hey, we've already decided this is going to be a valuable thing. We really want to do it. How do you think that your customer is going to interact with this? Whether it's an internal customer or external, right? How do you think that they're going to interact with that thing that you're changing? And when you go in, trying to adopt an agile mindset and really kind of iteratively demo the things that you're changing to the customer, it gets you out of the mindset that you're talking about. Like, yeah, let's just talk about whether this button should be this color or that color. You can kind of drive and have discipline around the conversation and say, I should ask about whether you think this is a valuable change still, right? I'm showing it to you for the first time, maybe. Is it still the value that you were thinking you're going to get out of it?
Yeah. Let me ask a follow up. And this happened, and this happens a lot. So I had this conversation with someone yesterday who is an administrator of a very popular customer success platform that I won't name just now, but I guess what it is. And they said, "Oh, I got this request, and it was like, oh, I want X, Y, and Z Slack notifications for all of this for this brand new team that's coming online, and when can I have that done?" It was sort of that's what this person received.
Mm.
Uh, and they were like, yeah, how do I redirect this into like what problem are we solving, or where's the value here? How do you almost coach your stakeholders on
Mm.
how to give good information?
Much more challenging. That is an entirely different challenge. I think it has a lot to do with making sure, again, that foundation of having a value focused conversation is there, and that when you're talking with your stakeholder, that they understand that's where you're coming from. If you are new to this, right? If maybe you're at your organization, you haven't really had any of those conversations, and maybe you're thinking, oh, well, I should, like, I personally care about whether or not I'm doing something valuable day to day. But people are just throwing me like these requests, like you described, like just set up this new team for me. I don't care. Just do it by the end of the month. Um, Coming back and kind of level setting with your stakeholders, identifying who those are. If they're not the person who's kind of passing the thing along to you, maybe it's another rung up. But have that initial conversation that says, just level sets and says, "Hey, I know what you're asking for. We can obviously do this, but I'm seeing a pattern of things that continue to happen where we're just getting individual requests like this. And really, I want to make sure the time I'm spending or the time my team is spending is going to be valuable to the success of the organization. And if you can have that initial conversation, then you can propose, like, why don't we sit down for 30 minutes? Let's really talk about what is this new team? What kind of future things might they be interested in? Like, what should we think about when we enable them inside of this new platform? But are there going to be any kind of like traps or hiccups or things that we might need to do differently that would affect the existing system? Like, it could be something that they procedurally do very different than a lot of the other teams that are inside of that system. And starting to have those conversations kind of unravels a lot of the more value focused discussion, and then leads you back to then building out more and more specific requirements that you might have around that team, and then to try to cap it off. Like, your responsibility is not just, hey, I'm going to have this conversation with you. Inevitably, whatever you decide in those, you have to deliver, like, obviously. And so make sure that you're not over promising with your stakeholders to the point where you're just not able to provide the types of things. Like, be very realistic, and that trust will kind of grow over time. It's not a light switch moment for you. It's going to take some time.
I really like that, and there's something there to be said too. Like those values that you're just describing to me are like the exact same values when you're customer facing and you're trying to help them deliver some fix, or if you're in customer success, like helping them achieve some ROI. Like, to me, it's the exact same, you're same values that you're applying in that first role that you learned very early on in your career, and then now sort of, applying it to, this more internal facing. And I have a theory that some of the folks that are like customer facing that have the chops like to be technical become some of the best like ops people, because they know how to be incredibly empathetic. They know how to be, drive discovery and sort of dig into the problem and help drive a resolution to that. So I can see it in you. Those values must have been ingrained at a very early stage. Maybe even I'm staring at your LinkedIn here too, but maybe even early as your barista days,
Yes,
when
yes.
you were serving coffee. So that's great to hear. So question, out of curiosity, so like there's been a lot of hot topics in the industry. Like we've heard from a lot of people in business systems or more operations roles, like there's, centralizing data, unifying it is a hot topic. Everyone's trying to figure that out. Everyone's trying to figure out automation. AI has been, one of the hot topics here too. Like out of all those like kind of key things that are going on, like what excites you the most about the future, or where, business systems are going for SaaS companies?
Yeah, that's a great question. Obviously, AI is the number one hot topic. Everybody wants to put it inside of their product. If you're talking to a vendor, you're working with some company and they haven't talked about AI, let me know. That would be crazy to me. Everyone is very interested in it, and I think it has, my perspective is it has a transformational value. Although there's a state where we're kind of currently at, and everybody talks about kind of the trough of disillusionment, right? We're kind of nearing that tipping point where there was so much energy very early on, and now we're seeing products that are actually manifesting into the market, and they will reach occasionally up to these large enterprises, and we might be interested in looking at them to adopt, right? There's also, I think, a lot of pushback from whether it's your leadership or management around what does it mean to actually use AI, and so that's still kind of being fleshed out, I think, on a day-to-day basis. And a lot of that conversation happens very fluidly, because although the kind of like history lesson that I give to folks who are like, wow, this AI is really great, and it's going to have so much value, is that this product is substantively different than kind of past looking products that have been released, like the smartphone, for instance. The smartphone was obviously a valuable thing, a technological advancement, but it was grounded in a lot of like really disciplined understanding about what the technology was going to be capable of in the next like 5 to 10 years. So when the first initial like smartphones were being released, there is already an understanding from the OEMs and people who are developing or looking to develop software for the platforms, that there's going to be things like GPS modules that are just too large to fit the form factor that I'm going to be interested in putting it into, but they're going to get smaller because that's the trajectory. So I understand that in the next 5 years, GPS is just going to be native to my smartphone. And what does that unlock for me as a software product that I can sell to someone? AI has kind of had the complete opposite growth pattern here, where we understood a bit of where ML was applicable. There's very niche places where that occurred, and a lot of them were hidden from a lot of people, whether you're in business and in the industry or not. They were very like obscure. You couldn't really see them as prevalent. The most that people will understand is you go to like a YouTube and there's an algorithm behind it that's driven by machine learning. This is very different. I think there it's almost like a technology looking for a use case, right? Like we just decided we're going to build this thing. It was a natural occurrence of like all of this research that we did, but there was nothing ahead of it to say this is what we want to do. And now we're in a situation where we're kind of putting it everywhere and just let's see what kind of sticks. So I think that's an enormous challenge in the like space today, is that I don't think we've really landed on anything other than the understanding of what is potentially possible. And so we're like scratching a lot of that.
I also, personal opinion to arriving now, I feel like that some of it isn't even just tech looking for a use case, but the use case is I got to keep up with everybody else who, like, I'm supposed to have AI, and so I should go have AI, and that's the use case.
Yeah.
Sometimes I'm curious about this. This observation that I make is, and you even said it, Dan. Every product's got their new AI module, section, processor, whatever that they're now hawking. My question is, what's your opinion on that versus some sort of overall AI strategy? It's like, okay, if my CSP has AI in it and my support ticketing system has AI in it and my teleconferencing system has AI in it, great. But can they talk to each other? And do I need them to talk to each other enough to make some coherent observation? So this is a space that I've been wrestling with, and I'm curious to hear your perspective because you're on top of it.
Yeah, I will say we're still in very early days in terms of determining whether they should or shouldn't talk to each other.
Okay.
Most of the space that we've kind of explored and gone down is still um, very like prescriptive in the fact that we understand a specific process that we're looking to modify by the use of AI. And there's a tons of different technologies you could select from, right, that are out there, and picking like one or two parts of that process to actually attach a AI workflow into, or at least accelerate. Maybe you can just kind of take it out and accelerate that by using AI. But the case is pretty obvious that in a lot of organizations there are teams kind of autonomously looking at all of these different technologies, like you described. Like if I'm inside of some ticketing system, I understand that the technology and capability they're trying to sell me is really valuable and powerful, and so I'm interested in that thing. From a I think there's actually a big value in not turning those things on just yet, right? Not actually going in and saying, let's just flip the switch because everybody else is doing it. We need to just ramp up as fast as we can. And instead being very like prescriptive about our usage of the technology, because there are some known research side effects to enabling a system like that or granting access to folks, that we see manifesting in like software development roles, where you have this huge bifurcation that occurs when somebody introduces an AI system into that workflow that causes senior resources to speed up, but you lose all of the tail end of your resources. So all your juniors aren't able to bridge that gap of knowledge. And if we do the same thing in a lot of these other cases, we're kind of going to manifest that same reality, right? If our support teams get access to these tools and we aren't specific and we don't have change management around that, like how they should be using these things, what it's valuable for, where it's not, then we're just going to create this kind of widening gap that I don't think we've tried to address at all, right? We haven't really focused and said, maybe juniors don't use this thing for a little bit because it's actually not beneficial to you as a human. It will make you faster when you understand the difference between a good and a bad answer. But right now, you need to understand that at like a fundamental level, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think there's kind of two camps. There's the move fast and there's the go slow. I try to visit both in the conversations that I have. Because I think there are areas that it's extremely transformational, especially in support. Being able to offload some of the simplest things that nobody, if you honestly ask them, nobody wants to answer how to reset my password another time, or give me this piece of documentation that's readily available to my customer. Nobody wants to answer that. And so there are valid cases where you can constrain a lot of the systems and say, you should do this easy stuff because we would much rather do the hard stuff. And maybe that hard stuff helps us to get better, and we can use AI to actually like speed up some of that harder stuff.
That's super cool. I just finished reading actually a book called Human Plus Machine, and it's from the CTO of Accenture.
Mm.
And in it, he talks a lot about like, like he kind of equates AI to like robotics in the factory floor, where, when they first launched robotics, like one robot ended up killing someone because it hit the human, or, and same like with autonomous cars. There's like so much decision making that they have to do. And, do they hit the kids on the sidewalk, or do they smash into the vehicle with a family in it? Like when there's something, those are the only two options that it can make. Like which one does it decide is the better option? And what's interesting is he kind of, when he kind of equates it to the robots in the factory floor, he says like, I mean, the book's called Human Plus Machine, so he talks a lot about how robots working with machines are the most effective factories, where they might have autonomous robots, but like at a BMW factory, for example, the autonomous robot will help the human put the part in. Like they might be the ones doing the heavy lifting, and they might be screwing something in, but like it's the human that really eyeballs like where it has to go and understands like some of the nuance of things. So they don't have, a lot of the factories don't have it fully automated. And so I like when you're talking about like support channels being fully automated, or parts of it, like, and you're saying that in B2C, like the reference point aligns with me in my head, because I'm like, yeah, some places it's good. Like at an Amazon factory or warehouse, you have fully autonomous robots just picking up packages, putting packages in boxes, and it's just, the full thing is completely automated. But I can foresee like a future where, every customer facing person just has a bot, and would be awesome if it's actually a robot with a personality. That would be so cool. And not just an AI widget, but like, the ability to be like sitting there doing your work. I'm, got to respond to a customer. The robot's giving me some quick insights. I've got to set up for a QBR. My robot buddy is doing some quick insights, or pulling the latest metrics, giving me some suggestions of how I could handle a call. Like it's almost like having a coach on the sidelines, and like an encyclopedia all at your fingertips. So like, I think there's like so much potential in the future, but I agree with what you've been saying. Like, let's not all jump into it overnight, because those robots don't quite exist just yet. It seems like.
Yeah, and I like that analogy back to, like the factory floor and automation there. I think what we're kind of noticing, and it honestly does scare, like it puts a chilling effect on a lot of folks, that this is automation for knowledge work, right? This is just a completely different thing than what I grew up knowing is automation. These are things that are you're able to much more fluidly define a goal, and then your knowledge work at your like white collar level, these are things that you just didn't initially think were going to be possible for a computer to do. And I think there's a good distinction point there. Like even in the factory floor case, there's going to be some situations where that automation can't traverse the gap that's there in terms of human decision making. And even though we're talking about this kind of knowledge work automation, the current state, just to be super like straightforward with everyone, the current state is these things don't make good decisions, right? It's so easy to get them to do things that a human being would never do, right? They would never respond to certain questions, or they would never respond and give you like this type of access, right? It's very easy to kind of socially engineer these systems into getting the goal that you want, but that it doesn't make a decision about whether that goal was a good thing or not a good thing, right? Like whether it was good or bad. And so it, I think the current state of the technology and the way that, like, as these kind of things get introduced from a leadership level, the communication needs to be really clear, and kind of the capabilities need to be understood, that everybody just immediately thinks AI is here, jobs are gone, I'm not going to be able to do anything anymore. My knowledge work and all of the training I had is for nothing. The actual, like, true distinction, especially the example I gave was software development. The true distinction that's happening between folks who are effective using AI and your junior resources entirely boils down to decision making. And so if you're working inside of success or support, or you're a software developer and you're not interacting with these systems to understand that they are not doing decision making well, and you're not also able to communicate that to your leadership and management when inevitably they want to put those things in place, I think you're doing yourself a disservice, because that's the most valuable area that you're going to have in the next 2, 3, 4 years, right? I can't predict the future. Maybe they magically become hyper intelligent and we no longer have to think anymore and all of our wildest dreams come true. But I think the reality of the experience that I've had working with it, and also trying to configure things around business processes, leads me to believe that the human being is just kind of being taken another notch up to be the decision maker in that process, just like the factory floor.
Mhm.
Super interesting perspective. I've never considered, but I see it. The AI revolution is almost the equivalent of, the automation of the factory floor, but it's the service world, or parts of it at least, that are now ripe for automation, and to your point, Jean, a robot augmentation, but not maybe a robot replacement.
Mhm.
Give us a prediction, Dan, as we start to wind down. It can be on AI, it can be on systems in
Mm.
general, but give us a prediction on what you see coming.
Ooh, that is a great question. And I always love my predictions, because either they're very wrong and I get to find out and people will tell me, and then I learn, or they're very right and then I feel really good about myself. So uh, there's no in between. Obviously, you can't have both. The My prediction around AI is that we will actually most likely see it, based on the actual usage from enterprises and even smaller companies. LLMs will probably continue to grow and will build larger and larger models, but the actual effective models are going to be much smaller. They're going to be much more specific and targeted models that cost much less. Trying to kind of jam an enormous LLM that requires a farm of GPUs, and we need to light the like forests on fire just to run these things. That just doesn't make sense economically in any enterprise, to be fair. Whether you're a Google or an Amazon, it's just not effective. And so most of the cases that we'll likely see are, we're going to start shrinking our models down. They're going to get better and better. They will continue to get better. It may plateau, but they're also going to get smaller and be more effective at running. And we already kind of see this trend in the consumer space with Apple putting, chips on their machines, which admittedly I did buy one, and running, local payloads directly from either your phone or on your laptop, right? I think smaller is most likely going to be the future, and all of the kind of investment and like high costs that we're seeing right now, those will still continue for the largest models, but we'll likely see that recede, and it'll be much more about the efficiency of the model than it is today.
Very interesting. Any last tips for those that are like shopping, and should we go out and buy a laptop right now, or what's maybe before the I don't want to get too political, but maybe before the tariffs hit too.
Yeah. I mean, that's a uncertainty space. Right now, the hardware itself is very inflated in price. Like, everybody went out and grabbed all of the GPUs they could possibly get. If you can find one on eBay, or a friend who knows a friend, maybe. Most likely, if you're kind of like an avid interest in developing tools with these systems, or just kind of engaging with them offline off of the service providers, trying to find like some cheap hosting solution that's maybe cloud-based, that will be more cost effective. I can't really like stomach the $3,000, $4,000, $5,000 on a laptop just to run a couple of fun things for yourself. But if you can encourage your boss to buy one for you, you should.
Yeah, I love that friends of friends that are peddling AI GPUs.
Hey, the black market that's out there. That's the new hot commodity.
Love it. Well, I appreciate you joining us today and sharing some of your insights into the space and your journey into business systems. It's just, yeah, wonderful to hear and learn from someone else who started in support and kind of, climbed their way into business systems and now to, AI ultimate supremacy or something. So, yeah, thanks again for joining us. Appreciate having you here.
Yeah, anytime. Thank you.
Thanks, Dan.